It's your boy back with an all new reaction. Today we're reacting to Black Culture Keeps Blacks Down. This is why Thomas Sowell. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you want to see any other reactions, drop a comment. Let me know what you want me to react to. Let's get right into it.
The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which black kids grew up in America today.
So they had...
There's no gangster rap that was pervasively available in Germany. I mean, the average of black kid today, I think, is probably better off, certainly materially, than, say, Ben Carson was when he was growing up.
Ben Carson, the famous
black
surgeon at Johns Hopkins.
Right, right.
Who is immensely accomplished in every way.
Yes.
Right.
I would say that certainly the black kids who are growing up today have a higher material standard of living than I had. The difference was that the schools were good when I came along. They were.
I agree with them. I grew up poor. Don't get it twisted. I grew up poor. I grew up in Philly, super poor. But even our poor was different than my grandmother or grandfather poor, where they didn't have like running water or just basic necessities and stuff like that. So I grew up poor too. Roaches, rats, mice, all that in the hood. But I still had a phone. I still had internet. I still had like all these luxuries that people in quote unquote third world countries would look at as a luxury and stuff. So I think we're, as a people, we're definitely doing better than people of his time.
Especially good in New York at that time, hard as that is to believe. But the kids who grew up in that same place where I lived, they will not get that same education. Now that can be blamed on somebody, but it has very little to do with what happened 100 or 200 years ago. And it's true in other countries. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, there's a tribe, the Igbos, who are living in one of the least fertile parts of Nigeria, who were in fact enslaved in centuries past by other tribes and so on. When the British moved in and set up schools, the Igbos went for the schools. By the time Nigeria became independent, the Igbos had climbed above the other groups that had been ahead of them to begin with. So, but there are all kinds of cross currents of factors. The particular culture, or the particular geography, you run through the whole list of them.
Yeah, him just bring that up, talking about our education system. A lot of education in the black inner city is failing. We have people that can't read on an 8th grade level, kids that can't read, write, or spell. We do horrible at math and stuff like that. It's terrible how bad the schooling has got in certain neighborhoods. Well, specifically like public schools is terrible.
You cite, in Intellectuals and Race, you cite an observation by the intelligence expert, IQ scientist, James Flynn, that just stopped me cold. After the Second World War, you've got large numbers of American troops remaining in Germany. For that matter, there's still several tens of thousands there today. And both black and white American soldiers had children with German women. And Flynn discovered that those children growing up in Germany showed no IQ differences at all. The black kids and the white kids, the same. Quoting Intellectuals and Race, Professor Flynn concluded that the reason was that the offspring of black soldiers in Germany, and now you're quoting Professor Flynn, grew up in a nation with no black subculture, close quote. Which means what? Which means they experienced exactly the same expectations. Is this the...
No. The expectations are external. The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which black kids grew up in America today.
So they had...
There's no gangster rap that was pervasively available in Germany.
So here's what I'm getting. There is something about black subculture in America today that holds African Americans themselves back?
Yes. In fact, I went into this in a previous book on which about black rednecks and white liberals, because that same subculture.
Let's talk about two of your books here. Go ahead.
because that very same subculture held whites in the South back as well. That in the time, this mental testing in the First World War turned up, among other things, the fact that whites from various 4 or 5 southern states scored lower on the mental test than blacks from 4 or 5 northern states. And so it really was a question of the subculture that was there, which was a handicap to both.
All right. And so whose job is it to say, wrong subculture, folks, you're harming yourselves?
Our job.
Well, I would think in an ideal world that intellectuals might take on that task, but the world that we live in, I've noticed, is not ideal.
All right. What is to be done? Take a look at President Lyndon Johnson speaking at Howard University in 1965.
Oh, yes.
But freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying now, you are free to go where you want and do as you desire and choose the leaders you please. You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair.
It's pathetic. It's not a question of, there's no you who has the control to be completely fair or completely unfair. I mean, the circumstances are, so someone once criticized the mental tests on grounds that the tests were unfair. And I think it was David Reisman who said, the tests are not unfair, life is unfair, and the tests are measured.
This goes into the idea of now, like DEI and affirmative action and stuff like that, and it's not actually, in my opinion, helping black people. If anything, it's harming us by not holding us to the same standard. We're being held to a lower standard and expected to do less. You know, it's making worse doctors, teachers, and professionals, and it's taking away jobs from people that actually earned it and deserved it. We do have an issue with our culture, and we have we gotta be honest about it. We came from 400 years of slavery. We had Jim Crow. We didn't have the same opportunities. That's not fair. That wasn't fair. But like you said, life isn't fair. We gotta find a way to work through it and get through it. Other races, other groups of people went through hardships as well. They didn't have an easy start here either. If you look at Asians and how well they succeed, they're the top of the food chain when it comes to like how much money they make, education level, success, and stuff like that. And they had to deal with racism as well. They had to deal with immigration, not knowing the language, and a bunch of atrocities as well. But that's not an excuse to hold us back. You feel me? It's nothing in 2024 a black person can't do that a white person can, and vice versa. We don't have separate rights. We have the same amount of opportunities. We got to just be able to push through it instead of crying and complaining about it.
Measuring the results. But who has control of life? Who has control of the past? Who has control of the culture that people have in the present, which they've inherited from the past?
So Lyndon Johnson, in fact, although good liberal that he was, at least in regard, Lyndon Johnson had a complicated career and changed positions on issues many times. But good liberal though he was at that moment, he was in fact engaging in a breathtaking arrogance.
Yes.
On 2 counts. One, that white people were the ones who were responsible for where black people stood in the race, that it was up to whites entirely. That blacks, as he described, I'm putting this black people are passive, they're acted upon.
That's right, that's right.
And then the second act of arrogance is the supposition that somehow the federal government could fix it.
Yes, it is staggering. But if you wanted to be charitable, you could say, well, he said this in 1965. But if you say, all right, why are people now repeating it in 2013 when we've had nearly half a century of experience to the contrary? And if you look within the black community, those blacks who had escaped what I call the black redneck culture, they've moved on. So, but it's the culture the different parts of the black community had. They were different.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, in his famous 1965 report entitled "The Negro Family: The Case for National Action," close quote. Longish quotation, but it gets to something, I believe. Moynihan: the fundamental problem is that of family structure. The Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. A middle class has managed to save itself, but for vast numbers of the unskilled and poorly educated, the fabric of conventional social relationships has all but disintegrated. So long as this situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. Close quote. When Moynihan wrote those words, the illegitimacy rate among African Americans was 25%. Today, the illegitimacy rate among white Americans is 36%. Among Hispanics, more than 50%, and among African Americans, more than 70%.
It's sad. The black family has been destroyed. The modern family in general has been destroyed, and we have so many single mothers and baby mothers, and the culture promotes that type of behavior, and it leads to nothing but broken families, heartache, people growing up without their fathers, lower education, and a bunch of other things. It's disgusting. That's one of the biggest epidemics that people don't talk about in the black community. It's the broken home. It's the father not being there. It's the baby mama culture.
Yes.
Aside from throwing up your hands in despair, what is to be done?
The first thing to be done is to understand that this was a result of policies begun in the 1960s. This is not a legacy of what happened 100 years before the 1960s.
The breakdown of the black family is not a legacy of slavery.
No, if you the classic study of this goes all.
I don't know if he's gonna bring it up or not, but during Jim Crow, we had some of the highest marriage rates ever in the black community. I think it was like 80%, 85% or something like that. Back in the day in the black community, you had to be married. You know, like having a child out of wedlock wasn't a thing. My grandparents died married to each other, had a bunch of kids. That's just the way they were raised. They had good like religious fundamentals. Even if they always didn't follow them, the community followed them. And it would have brought a lot of shame to your family if you were having kids out of wedlock. You had multiple baby daddies and all these other things going on. They wasn't playing that back in the day. They'd rather a woman that start having kids, 15, 16, have a bunch of kids, get married, be with the same person for the rest of their life. But they weren't playing, you about to have a bunch of baby daddies, the dad not about to be in the life and stuff like that. So, yeah.
All the way back to the era of slavery. And they find that most black kids, even under slavery, had lived with two parents. And that was true all the way up until the 1960s. And so if you really want to find out what's changed, it has changed since the 1960s. And the fact that whites now have a higher rate of illegitimacy than blacks had when Moynihan wrote suggests that this is something that spreads out. But if you look at something else, if you look at those blacks, and look at black husband-wife families, the poverty rate among such families has been in single digits every year since 1994. And so if you look at the external causes, why the husband and wife families and the welfare single mom families all are facing the same society and objective things, but the results are radically different because the cultures and values are different.
So you would roll back welfare. I guess that's the principal policy. So what would Tom Sowell do? One, you'd eliminate welfare, you'd reform welfare. What would you do?
Roll it back.
All right. And what about affirmative action?
Eliminate it.
Just gone.
Yeah.
Colorblind policy completely. All right.
That's the only way we're truly going to get rid of racism. If we stop talking about it, we stop pushing these narratives that black people need a bunch of help and special privileges and shit like that. And we just start letting people own their own merit instead of having this victim mentality. And when he's talking about with the welfare state and how back in the 60s, 70s, you couldn't get welfare if the child father was around and a bunch of other stuff. It was a bunch of policies within welfare that kind of promoted the single motherhood household. But now we have rap music and other things promoting being a single mom, being a city girl and shit like that.
What prospect for that do you see?
None.
No black leader of any standing. I'm talking about a political leader as opposed to an intellectual such as yourself. You've got, well, there's you, there's Walter Williams. Do you get the sense that there's a growing generation, a rising generation of African American intellectuals who say, enough of this, I'm with Tom Sowell?
Well, I don't know if they'll go that far. There's no point.
That would be asking a lot.
There's no point being reckless. But I think there are people like Shelby Steele and many others, Larry Elder. You can run through a long list, and there are more such people now than there were, say, in the 1970s. But in terms of political leaders, all the incentives politically are for black leaders to blame all problems in the black community on the larger society.
White people
and that enables them to take on the role of being the defender of the black community against enemies, which in turn creates the situation in which many blacks don't feel that anything that they do is going to help themselves unless it's done politically as a group. That there's no point. I mean, why would you, if you believe what they say, why would you want to knock yourself out in school knowing that the man is not going to let you get anywhere? Well, one of the most pathetic things I heard in recent years was a young black man saying that, at one point he thought he would join the Air Force and become a pilot. And then he says he realized that the white man is not going to let a black man become a pilot. And he was saying this decades after the Tennessee Airmen had established their reputation in combat in Europe. Man. But the hopelessness is one of the big products of the race industry. That you have no chance. I remember giving a talk at Marquette, and at the end of the talk, among the questions that was asked, a young black man got up and he said, "Even though I am graduating from Marquette University, what hope is there for me?" And having gone through college when I was in the 50s, I don't remember any blacks saying that in the 1950s, when there was a lot more obstacles to overcome than there were when this guy is graduating from Marquette. But you have to produce that kind of feeling in order to serve the interests of those in the race industry.
Final question then. Maybe we can think in terms of that young man at Marquette, or let's put it this way.
It's this idea in the black community, even when I was growing up, that the white man is holding us down. The white man has his thumb on us. The white man will never let you run for office, and never let you be the manager, and never let you this and that. It's just a bunch of bullshit and fear mongering to keep us down and to stop us from wanting better for ourselves. And we always have somebody to blame instead of ourselves. But if you like these type of reactions, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Your boy out.